European Union on Sunday condemned Hamas for using hospitals and civilians as human shields in Gaza. The European Union also urged Israel to show maximum restraint to protect civilians in Gaza. Israeli defense forces say they are doing everything they can. They released videos and audio recordings over the weekend of an attempt to provide a hospital in Gaza with fuel that was thwarted by Hamas leadership. We have seen reports of death and devastation in Gaza around hospitals and in buildings in the area. Now, Maysara Reyes was an emergency doctor and medical supervisor at Medecins du Monde for 2 years. On November 5th, just over a week ago, he was killed alongside several family members when his building was bombed in Gaza. The news of his death and the death of other healthcare workers in the region has pushed Medecins du Monde and other humanitarian organizations to demand for a ceasefire call from Ottawa. With more on this, let's go to Nadja Pollaert, General Director of Medecins du Monde Canada. Nadja, welcome to the program.
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Marcos.
For first things first, tell me about the colleague that you lost, Maysara Reyes. Tell me more about this.
So
this
Dr. Reyes, he's been working with us for the last 2 years. He's actually a Palestinian colleague living in Gaza, and he made a decision to live in Gaza and to work in Gaza. He had studied in the UK and could have had other opportunities, but he really wanted to support his community. So they had to flee their house. He couldn't go to the south because his parents and other members of his family were too old to be moved. And also, we all know that if you move to the south, there is no shelter. There are so many humanitarian needs. So they decided to stay in the northern Gaza. The place they stayed was bombarded, and there was a lot of shelling, so they were under the rocks for over 48 hours. And finally, when the ambulance was ready to come, because they didn't have enough fuel, so they couldn't, really do the emergency support for this family of 14 people, children, himself, his wife, and his parents. They couldn't actually help them because the shelling started again and the ambulance had to withdraw and the bulldozer had to withdraw. So they died in a horrible situation, like many other people in Gaza are dying right now.
Now, do you blame anyone for the death? Do you blame an organization or a government for this death, or is this just the horrors of war? It seems like your group, Medecins du Monde Canada, probably has lots of experience with the horrors of war and terrible things around the world.
Yeah, unfortunately, this kind of situation is our business, but I think that worldwide, what we see from NGOs, also from the UN and some governments, this is a horror which is unprecedented. There are more children than have died in Gaza since the 7th of October than in all humanitarian conflicts since 2019. This is horrendous. We have 80% of the people who died who are civil population. So there are no fighters. They're not affiliated. They have no political objective. They just want to survive. 50 journalists have died. UNRWA, which is the United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees, they have lost over 100 employees, which is the most lost employees killed on duty since the existence of the United Nations. We have 200 humanitarian workers who died, and I can go on.
Well, you know what? I'll let you go on because there's plenty to say there. But I do want to ask you, do you trust the numbers that we get from the Gaza Health Authority? Do you not question them at all? You mentioned journalists, and this obviously, being on radio, being in media, I've looked at that, right? And of the journalists that have unfortunately died, many of them were working for Gaza television, which, is a propaganda outfit, many people would allege, right? So it is war, right? So do you trust everything that's coming out of the Gaza Health Authority, which is Hamas? Do you trust everything they say?
So first of all, when we take the numbers, you're right to stress that we have to be cautious on all the numbers. So usually for NGOs, the numbers we advance are the numbers we have from the UN. And for sure, it's an estimate. But for sure also, on the experience we do have, we know that usually there are more people who actually died than the numbers we do have. And frankly, I think there is a lot of focus on numbers. We had a lot of focus also on humanitarian aid, how much trucks did actually enter or not enter. But we know it's not sufficient. So that's why we met in Ottawa last week, several NGOs, Canadian NGOs, Save the Children, Oxfam, Islamic Relief, and others, to say we do need a ceasefire, because right now the only thing we know for sure is that the situation is a completely shut down regarding hospitals and medical care, in particular Al-Shifa Hospital. And that's what we know from our colleagues from MSF and from other organizations of staff from them working there.
We're with Nadja Pollaert, General Director of Medecins du Monde Canada. Nadja, I have to ask you about how much blame Hamas gets in this. Even the United Nations has admitted that they've got 1 million liters of fuel that they're not releasing to hospitals in order to keep tunnels running. So when it comes to fuel, do you say that are you also calling on Hamas to release some fuel for the hospitals in Gaza?
So our job is not to blame or to say this is political issues. Our job is to be there for the suffering of the people, and the rest is politics. So that's why also all NGOs have really denounced the fact that there are hostages also, which is for sure a violation of international humanitarian law, and as is the bombing of civilians. So we are not siding on political sides. We are siding on the side of human rights.
So what can be done to side on human rights for the entire region? What do you think can be done right now to save lives in Gaza?
So that's why we have been asking for a ceasefire, because the delays that we get, for example, take babies and infants and change them from one place to the other within 1 hour so they're not under the shelling, is just not feasible in the current situation. That's why we've been asking for the ceasefire to enter humanitarian aid to Gaza and to stop the situation. It seems that it's the only possible situation, because contrary to other conflicts, also for you to remind, is that in other war zones, people they're leaving, they're refugees, they're going to neighboring countries to have more security. In Gaza, nobody gets in, nothing gets out. So people are basically stuck, and that's why everybody says it's a graveyard for children. It's a prison. It's very images that show that people are really stuck in the zone, and there is no way of escaping. There is no safe space.
How many times has your organization called for ceasefires in other conflicts? Is this something that you regularly do?
Yeah, absolutely. So, what is important to remind also that what we see over the last years, that especially health facilities and health workers are often the first ones who are bombarded, who are dying. This was true for Syria and for other conflicts as well. So there's really a tendency to target specific civil institutions like hospitals, schools, which is for sure a violation of international humanitarian law.
Now, obviously, Israel would say it's also a violation of international law to house weapons and to house terrorists inside these institutions, hospitals and schools and others, right? So how do you balance those two things? Because both of those things can be true. That is also another violation of international law. So what do you expect Israel to do here?
What we expect, as I said, is a ceasefire. So it's not for us as a humanitarian organization to try and give comments on political issues. So our job is really to be there for the people. And right now the situation is a disaster, and it seems disproportionate to what the aim is when you see that mostly civilians die. So what we believe is that there are other ways of doing things than killing civilians.
So what are the other ways?
It's a ceasefire.
A ceasefire, okay. The humanitarian pauses, these 4-hour windows that have opened up, is that not enough?
So we know it's not enough, and also, that if you think that before 80% of the population in Gaza were depending on humanitarian aid, because as a reminder, it's an occupied territory. So people needed food, water, everything, medicine, drugs before. And right now, in 4 hours, you can't do much. So we know from the UN that most of the humanitarian aid didn't go up to the north because there is no way of actually physically getting there because everything is bombarded. There is no roads. Then there is the whole issue of distributing aid. So we have a team of 20 people in Gaza for the last 20 years. And it's the same for us and for other organizations that it's difficult to set up the logistics if you can't get in touch with them. There is no communication. We cannot do what we would usually do, an assessment of the situation. We know that there are a lot of pregnant women, for example, and there are some people, have health issues like cancer and so on. So right now, we cannot do the evaluation. We cannot get to the people.
I apologize. You're a doctor, right? I didn't introduce you as doctor, and I should have, correct?
No, I'm just the director of the organization.
Okay, very good. Well, so Nadja, listen, we have to leave it there. I want to thank you so much for coming on the program, and thank you for talking about this.
Yeah, thank you for your time.
Nadja Pollaert is General Director of Medecins du Monde Canada.